Mark Kowalski was a man of science. A theoretical physicist with a distinguished career, he was well known for his research in quantum mechanics and time studies. The familiar world of formulas and experiments always seemed like a safe haven to him, where everything was logical and explainable. But one day, everything changed when his scientific research led him to a discovery that could revolutionize not only science, but reality itself. Mark's research was related to the so-called many worlds theory, a hypothesis according to which each decision point gives birth to a new universe, and all possible outcomes of one event can exist simultaneously in parallel realities. This theory excited his imagination, and at some point he thought about the possibility of creating a device that could penetrate one of these alternative universes. The project seemed fantastic, but Mark was obsessed. He spent years creating a device that he called the integral converter. It was a complex and delicate piece of equipment capable of manipulating the energy of the quantum field and theory, opening doors between worlds. When Mark first activated the device in his lab bunker, everything went according to plan. The integral converter began to stabilize the space, and he saw something that made his heart stop, a ripple in the air in front of him, as if the space itself was cracking, opening. Behind these ripples, something resembling a mirror image of his own laboratory was visible, but with distortions. The reality behind the rift looked a little wrong, as if the colors were too bright, and objects slightly shifted in their coordinates. Mark took a step towards the rift, and in that moment everything around him changed. Once on the other side, Mark found himself in the same laboratory but strangely transformed. The walls, the floor, even the air were saturated with some kind of heavy, strange feeling. The laboratory, which seemed empty and quiet, was not the place where he had worked all his life. She was different. An unfamiliar city opened up outside the laboratory. Everything looked strange. The architecture resembled his native London, but there was something elusively alien about it. There were no people around, although the streets showed signs of their recent presence. Cars parked along the side of the road, open windows of houses where everything looked as if the residents had left them in a hurry. But the main oddity was the sky. It was covered with a black haze, and instead of stars, some strange lights were flickering on it, as if this was not space, but someone's giant machine. Mark tried to return to his laboratory through the rift, but the portal closed, leaving him in this unknown world. He did not understand what had happened, but gradually began to realize he had ended up in one of the alternative universes. The reality he had entered was a dark reflection of his own world. One of the first things he noticed was the sound. A strange, shimmering hum emanated from the air, as if the space itself was vibrating, filling the city with an invisible energy. Mark instinctively felt that this energy was dangerous, but he could not understand what was causing it. In search of an explanation, he began to explore this strange world. The first thing he did was go to the local library, hoping to find some trace of information about where he was. The library looked strangely familiar, but all the books on the shelves were empty. The pages were white, without text, as if the world had lost its memory. However, in the far corner of the library, Mark found a book that was written in an unknown language, but its pages glowed with a faint blue light when he touched them. This glow did not come from the ink, but from the paper itself, which raised even more questions in Mark's mind. Turning one of the pages, he suddenly felt the room around him begin to spin, and then everything plunged into darkness. When he came to, a crowd of people stood around him, but these were not ordinary people. Their faces were hidden behind masks that resembled crumpled paper bags, and their movements were jerky, like puppets. They stood in complete silence, surrounding him in a tight circle. Mark tried to stand up, but he felt a strong pressure on his chest, as if something invisible was pressing on him. The masked people slowly began to approach closer, their silent steps echoing in the empty room. At that moment, he realized that he was being kept here for a reason. Someone, or something, knew that he had entered this world, and now it was not going to let him go. The days merged into a monotonous gray mass. Mark no longer distinguished time. Everything was somehow blurred. He wandered through the empty streets of this city, where there was neither sun nor moon. Time seemed frozen, and the city an endless labyrinth, where the buildings seemed the same, and no matter how long he walked, there was no end. One day, in one of the dark alleys, he heard voices. They were muffled, as if coming from the distant past. Following these sounds, Mark came to a small square where he saw a group of people. They looked strangely familiar, as if he had seen them in his world, but their faces were distorted, as if they had gone through many changes. "Mark," someone from the crowd whispered. He froze. "His name? Here?" Mark took a few steps forward, feeling his heart begin to pound. He needed to understand what was happening. How could they know his name? And why did these people look so familiar? "You made a mistake," the voice sounded again, but this time more clearly. The crowd parted, and a man in a black cloak, his face hidden by a hood, stepped forward. His eyes glowed with a red fire, and in his hands he held a strange object, some kind of ancient staff that pulsed with an ominous light. "You should never have crossed the boundary of worlds," the man said. "Now you have become part of this place." Mark took a step back, feeling a strange cold energy begin to surround his body, restricting his movements. Everything he once knew became meaningless. This world did not obey any laws of physics, and the longer he was here, the more he lost himself. He tried to resist, but his strength was leaving him. At some point it became clear to him, this world was devouring him. It was not just a reflection of reality, but something much more sinister. It was alive, and its purpose was to absorb everything that fell into it.